What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode number 3 of the Outlaw Gentleman podcast. Today, we have Michael Spyres in studio. We're going to sit down and have a conversation with Mike. I'm very excited. Let's get it going.
You're listening to the Outlaw Gentleman podcast, a show where we talk about whatever the hell we want. Here's your host, Kix Nelson.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I got Michael Spyres in the studio. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes,
Spyres?
sir. I know
right.
it's a weird pronunciation. It's like 11th century Scottish, but it's really odd.
Yeah, spelled a little different too.
Looks like Spyres.
Well, I'm glad to have you, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Of course.
I know it took us a while. You're gone a lot, so I'm glad you finally made it in, got home safe and sound, and here we are.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be here.
So, man, opera singer, huh?
I know it's not something you usually hear. I think I'm about the only hillbilly opera singer there is, to be totally honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know you're from Mansfield, Missouri, man.
Yeah, I was born and raised. I'm actually quite literally born in Mansfield. My parents wanted to have me in Springfield, but I didn't want to wait till then. So it was about a 2-minute drive from our house in Mansfield to the hospital when I was there, and that's where I was born and raised and went to school all my whole life. And my parents were teachers for over 40 years there in Mansfield. Yeah, and
Your parents were music teachers,
yeah,
there, right?
Both of them music teachers, and it's crazy because our whole family, we're all singers. My little sister, she's a Broadway singer, and my older brother, he helps run the opera house, but he's also traveled the world and sang opera. And my wife is an opera singer just here from Rogersville.
Wow! So you got a real musical family then, every one of you guys. That's pretty cool, man. What? How did you get started in? singing in the opera, because that's a very unusual career path.
Absolutely, and it's an odd one even for me to say, because when I tell it, it sounds like some kind of a story, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm kind of a good old boy, and I've always liked music, and my parents were always the weird ones though.
Right.
But the funny thing is, like, being from Mansfield, to be in a small town of only about 1,400 people. If there was any kind of funeral or any kind of wedding, we were the music for it. And
nice.
So since I was a little kid, we sang as a family, 2-3 times a week, quite literally. All the time. And my dad was the music director at church as well. And so we were singing every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, and Wednesday nights, always singing in church. And the funny thing, the way I got into opera, though, is I didn't really know I was going to be an opera singer, but I grew up with a very specific story that actually a lot of people who know me don't even know. But my two uncles from my mom's side were very influential in the oldest uncle, whom I met when I was like 6 months old, and then he died. He was a really peculiar character, and he's whom I was named after. Michael Williams was his name, and it was his dream to be an opera singer, and he was really, but he was what we call on the spectrum. He was probably Asperger's. But this was back in the 60s and 50s, and so really everyone just thought he was a little different.
Yeah, they didn't know what it was back then.
Yeah, but he was the kind of guy that you'd walk into the room and he wouldn't really look at your face, but he could be like, yeah, you need to cut your hair. You need to lose a little bit of weight, and that kind of guy. But he really gravitated towards opera, and he loved opera. But my other uncle loved jazz, and so the two of them would fight. And my mom grew up. Someday I want to write with my mom's help, write a movie script about my mother's upbringing, because it's one of the craziest things you can ever imagine.
That would be cool.
They grew up back and forth between the Ozarks and L.A. and Las Vegas, and they lived on the streets. But then anytime it got too hot out there, they'd come back to the Ozarks, and then she'd stay with her grandma. But my mom and uncles, they were coming back on the Greyhound by themselves when they were like 4 or 5 years old.
Really?
Yeah, going from California, like a lot of people from the Ozarks.
Yeah.
But my older uncle, it was just his dream to be an opera singer, and he was this health freak and health nut, and never drank, never smoked, never did anything, and was just like a monk basically. But the only possessions that he had were his records, and they were opera records, and he would just study them all the time. And he was a singing waiter, and he actually got a standing ovation from the Rat Pack when he was a singing waiter. Yeah, out in Vegas. Vegas because my grandma was she was a barmaid the whole life, 45 years barmaid, single barmaid. And she was a pretty interesting character.
Right.
There's too many stories to tell, but she was friends with all the people who come in, and my uncle was a waiter there. And, he wanted to be an opera singer, but it takes a long time. It takes like 10 to 15 years to kind of get established. And he was on his path to becoming an opera singer, but about, I believe it was 36, early 37, they got diagnosed with a really bizarre rare form of throat cancer.
Oh, wow.
And he died within a year and a half. And so he never really got to have any kind of a career.
Yeah.
And my mom named me after him and kind of gave me the namesake. And since I was a little kid, she said, maybe you can be an opera singer and pick up where he left off. And I was like, no pressure, Mom.
Right.
No, it was a good thing. But then I just always had that in the back of my head. But we had always sung as a family. And I mean, we sing bluegrass and country and, gospel. That's what I sang all growing up, and some musicals and things like that. But opera is this weird kind of Mount Everest of singing. It's this kind of weird path that barely anybody goes on. And I understand why, because it takes forever to get anywhere to it.
Yeah.
But when I was 19, I went to school at it's MSU now. I went for 2 years and studied under a teacher, and he said, "Hey, I think you could make a career out of this. I really do think you could do." And I said, "I didn't know you could make a career singing opera. I thought it was just something that you do and someone discovers you, and it's like it's like American Idol."
That's what I thought.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's this kind of weird career path that takes 10 to 20 years, and you can last until you're about in your early 60s. Some people keep going, like Placido Domingo. A lot of people have heard of Domingo, or Pavarotti, the really famous ones. They lasted into their late 60s, and Domingo is still singing. He's around 82.
Wow,
still singing opera. But it's just crazy. It's this weird kind of a place that I landed in college, and I realized that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be a cartoon voiceover person, like we were talking before. I did commercials for Nick Sibley up in Springfield, and I would change my voice and do these kind of weird, wacky voices. And my favorite one was to always imitate Homer Simpson. And I wanted to do cartoon voiceovers. Like Mel Blanc was the biggest, person who for those the young kids, Bugs Bunny, and basically, every single cartoon that we grew up with from back in the Looney Tunes was voiced by one person only, named Mel Blanc. And he was my biggest influence my whole life. And I wanted to be like him. So I would just imitate sounds and stuff. And then when my opera teacher for those 2 years, he said, "Well, you already have a natural instrument." And because I've been playing instruments with my whole family, I'm a guitarist and play trumpet and saxophone and all that kind of stuff, because my parents were both music teachers. And basically, when school was done, we got to just play any instrument that we wanted to. Nice. And I would just practice all the instruments. And so I just started going with what I knew, and I knew how to imitate the voices. So I'd listen to these opera singers and I go, "Oh, he sounds like this," or "He sounds like this," and I would just imitate. And the teacher would be like, "Hey, man, that's a pretty neat thing, but that's not your voice." And I was like, what do you mean? So for like 2 years, it was just nothing but frustration. And then he moved to New York, and I said, "Oh God, I don't know what I want to do." And all my other friends said, "Yeah, you got to move to New York, and you got to move to a big city, and then you'll become an opera singer." But it's really funny, because I really don't like big cities whatsoever. Right. I'll stand them and I'll do work. And that's coincidentally what most of my job is now, is traveling to Paris, London, Vienna, all these big cities. And I'll be in New York next. And it's a crazy life. And I just didn't want to. When I was 21, everyone said, "You got to move to New York City if you want to be an opera singer." I was like, God, I can't do that. My parents and all of us are, we're poor. I don't want to put myself or my family or anybody into debt. So I didn't want to do what a lot of people did and just take out a bunch of school loans, because I just thought that was just asinine. Right. So I stuck around for a couple of years, and I lived with my parents after I quit college. And I did basically every odd job you can think of. I'd cut lawn and construction worker for a while, and I was a janitor back in my old high school. And that was kind of a trip, going back to being a janitor at the place that you went to, and thinking when you're 21, you're like, "Oh God, I guess I'm a janitor, you know,
Right.
like, but then realizing this is pretty cool. Actually, this is, you know, I love these kind of manual jobs or construction. I just love doing. It's really one of my favorite things because you get to use your whole body.
I'm the same way, man.
You know, you feel and you see what you've done. Like same thing with cutting the lawn. You're like, yeah, I did that. But
Yeah.
that's why singing has been such a weird thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, that's the same. That's why I like cutting hair so much, honestly, because every head is different, and it's like it's a piece of art to me.
No, absolutely.
You know, and so you get to see your instant gratification, your work instantly, and it's like an instant gratification, you know. So that's why I love cutting hair.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Same exact thing.
And like you said, every single head is different, and you can think you're good at one thing, and then someone comes in, you're like, oh, whoops, that looks terrible. I'm sorry.
Yep, my bad. Yep, we'll have to try that again. I've had a few of those.
A couple of weeks. Come back. Yeah, but I mean, that's what I always loved doing. But then I just saved up money, and I was lucky enough to be in this thing called the World Youth Choir, which is it was a choir, and it tells you how long ago it was. You had to send in a tape to be a part of it, and then it was a professional choir that met in Europe, and it was just like a long shot. I had no idea, like. You know, I had a friend who had done it and said, you should try to get into this choir. And I said, well, that's weird, you know, and it was my dream to travel the world because I'd never thought I'd be able to get outside the United States.
Right.
I mean, it was huge dream. But when we were a kid, the farthest out, I mean, we drove to Chicago once and we drove to Florida once. And that was about like the 2 vacations we had as a family because mom and dad were, you know, both teachers in 2 of the poorest counties in the United States. You don't really get to take a lot of vacations.
Right. Nope. I get it. We didn't either. When I was a kid, man, we didn't hardly go anywhere.
Yeah. But it made the imagination dream a lot. And so I wanted to see the world. And this friend said, if you do this tape, you know, you're a good enough singer that maybe you can get in. And so I did this tape and they accepted me. And it was, it's still going on. It's a worldwide organization, but it changed my life completely. I was 19 years old. Wow. And they said that, you know, everything would be paid for. The only thing you have to pay for is the flight over and flight back, which at the time was like, it was about $2,000. Air travel's gotten cheaper, but I had no idea how I was going to do it. But I knew that I had to. It's kind of up a creek, and I knew that I needed to get outside of where I am. So I saved up my money, and then I got my first credit card, and it took me like 10 years to freaking pay that off. You know? I took that one credit card as a Discover card. Yeah. I don't know about Discover cards.
Right.
You know,
I don't do credit cards.
Yeah, but I took it out, and I'd never had credit, so I did that when I was 19, and I put that flight on. But you know, to be honest, it was the best decision I ever made because you know a few months before it, I was like, I can't do this, and I better not. But then I realized that if I travel over there, then I'll be able to meet people from over in Europe, that's actually where I want to be, so I can learn languages and maybe get into the opera world. Because there's no way that I'm going to live in New York. I just don't want to live in New York City because I'd traveled there a couple of times with friends, and after a couple of days, I just get I get angry. Yeah. I just want to hit people.
I couldn't do it either, man. There's no way I could live in a city like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I can spend a couple of weeks there, but if I'm there for a couple of months, I mean, I'm a different person. So that's why I love the area we're from here in the Ozarks. It's just being able to just walk out and be in the woods just immediately right outside your door is just amazing.
Yeah, it's nice, man. Just go out there and enjoy some peace and quiet.
Exactly.
Not have the rush of the city, you know.
Exactly.
I've never lived in a big city like that, but I've lived in some bigger cities, you know, and I just hated every minute of it.
Yeah. It's just something about the energy of it, and to be honest, just the quality conversation you can have it sometimes, but just the way that the pace of a big city goes, it's nearly impossible to really get to know people, you know, people that are your neighbors. Like when I lived in Vienna, for 4.5 years, and I only met my neighbors. I lived in 4 different places, and I only met 2 neighbors out of that in 4.5 years. Wow. And both of the times was because they had called the police on me because I was singing in my apartment and I was too loud. I was like, oh, you asses, just come down and tell me to be quiet. But that's not the Viennese way.
Right.
Yeah.
I got to call the police. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for opera singing, which I wouldn't partying at all. But
right, just doing your thing, man.
Exactly. But anyways, going back to the choir thing, I went over there and I went to a country that I'd never heard of, which was Slovenia. And I was like, this is interesting. There's all these, I knew of Europe and I've heard of France and Germany and stuff like that. But they said the session was going to be 2 weeks of rehearsal in Slovenia. Then it was going to be touring around Europe for 2 weeks. And I said, that sounds amazing. And all I have to do is get the flight. So I flew over there to a place called Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia. And I got to meet all these people. There's in total around 120 people from 33 different countries.
Wow.
And it was so trippy, like meeting all these people, and English was the common language. And that was a great thing because that's the only language I spoke.
Right.
And so everybody was from all around the world getting to know each other in English. And I got to meet great friends from all these different countries. So, yeah.
So on episode 1, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it. I mentioned that you've been to a lot of countries.
Yeah.
I didn't know how many it was, though. So how many countries have you been to?
Okay. I've sung in 19 countries and been in 23 countries.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. We have 2 little boys, my wife and I, and one's 6 and the other one's getting returned at 4. They've been to 19 countries and 13. But so if anything ever goes south on my voice and we can't travel anymore, at least we gave them that.
There you go. They got to travel the world a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome, man.
But yeah, and after doing this choir, I realized that like Europe was a place that I could actually become an opera singer, and more importantly, learn the languages and really get to know music, because a lot of people can sing opera and can make the sounds, but unless you really understand the language and understand the stories behind it, there's no way to become an opera singer. And so I quite literally bought a one-way ticket to Europe. And I really cornered myself because my parents were like, well, Godspeed, and we will give you the best, but we got no money for you. So
we don't know how you're going to get home, but
exactly. You might just have to sing for your hitching money or whatever to get home. But but I didn't go into totally full-hearted because I had a few friends from this choir. And when I was 21, I went and auditioned a couple of places and didn't get anything. And then I had to fly back at the end of my 22nd year and sing for another person in Vienna. And I got into this conservatory where it didn't cost anything to get into. The tuition was $500 a year. And I said, I can probably swing that. And my friends from the choir said, there's a professional choir here in town where you could just sing and get money and pay for your housing, pay for all that stuff. And so that's how it all kind of started. And it was in Vienna. And I auditioned for years, and about 3-4 years, I took all the money that I had and tried to fly to a different place or go to a train. And, I ended up most of the time just one good tip, because I'm thinking about starting a blog because I'm a really cheap bastard. And I know how to eat on the cheap. And it's really cool because what I used to do is like I get a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter and some honey, and I just mix it all together.
Wow. There you go.
And that would be for a couple, that'll give you sustenance for 2-3 days.
There you go.
And then, occasionally you gotta keep back enough money for the beer money. And that's the good thing.
Yeah. Got to have that beer money, man.
Exactly. Yeah. And in Europe, it's a lot cheaper. So, it stretches it. It's great.
There you go, man. I love it. You should start a blog, dude. Your stories are incredible. I mean, I've been cutting your hair for a while now, and just listening to some of the stories you tell when you come in here, it just floors my mind, man, because of course I've never been out of this country either, but just the career path you chose and the stories you've got from being overseas and everything. It just, that's why I wanted you on the podcast, man, because it's just incredible what you've done and what you've been through. And I know you're not going to brag on yourself, but I'm going to brag on them a little bit. I mean, you're a pretty famous guy, man.
Well, it all depends on what you mean by fame. That's a good moniker. Is one of my friends is a fellow opera singer, and he was all pissed off that the last big opera news magazine that was on, he said, I didn't like that picture at all, and they misspelled this. And another friend said, hey, don't worry. Literally dozens of people are going to read that. The opera world is kind of, I mean, it's a niche within a niche. It might be this like high artistic place, but yeah. But being famous in the opera world is kind of like being famous in the, I don't know, an entomologist or
haircutting world.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's pretty good, actually. It's something that's worldwide, and there's kind of, it is like being a famous barber. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's a good comparison.
There you go. I know that I've been told. You tell me if this is true or not, because I've been told that. Like when you're overseas in some of these places and singing at some of these prestigious opera houses, that you can't even go out to eat. Like you gotta.
Oh, it's a funny thing. It's a really funny thing because in certain places, like especially in Italy, the people just live and breathe opera. Quite literally, if you say you're an opera singer, they will roll out the red carpet for you, and like. They will just be like, whoa, everybody, he's a famous opera singer.
Yeah.
Like, and they'll just stand up and start applauding. And you're just like, am I in the Twilight Zone? This is awesome. But it's so
what's
weird.
going on here?
Yeah, there's candid camera. But yeah, I had that happen a couple of different times. And like in Pesaro, which is the home of Rossini, who I kind of latched onto and sang a lot of his operas. His most famous opera would probably be, he's got two of them, that the Barber of Seville, to go back to Barbary,
nice.
That's the one that's the la 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 la, and then there's also the that's William Tell. So those are two really famous operas that he did, and I've done both of those, and
that's awesome.
And I was in his hometown, and I did a solo concert there with orchestra, and it was this overwhelming, crazy experience. Because after I got out, like the entire street was flooded, and there was hundreds of people there, and I was standing there signing autographs for almost 3 hours. And then after I left, my parents were there, and my aunt and uncle, and all the people were just kind of smiling, ear to ear, like, "What the hell's going on?" And it was awesome. Then we just started walking, and then more people were coming up, and they said, "We didn't want to wait, but now can we get your signature?" And it's like, yeah,
go ahead.
Then we walked past this restaurant, and everyone stood at the restaurant and started clapping. I was like, "Wow, this is insane!"
That's awesome. Yeah,
it's
good for you, man.
It's great that people do that, and I'm so happy that people do, but it's weird being in the position that, because I'm not like one of those people that just expects that,
right.
Being where we're from, it's like, yeah, well, that's cool. Good for you, man.
Right.
It's not like,
well, that's what I tell everybody too. I'm like, if you guys don't, when I'm talking about you, I'm like, you really got to check this guy out, because it's pretty funny. He goes overseas and does all these operas and stuff, and he's really famous. And then he comes back home and he's just a normal guy.
Yeah, exactly. Thank God.
It's kind of a nice break, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the only way I can kind of stay sane, to be totally honest. That's the only thing, this area and the way people are is the only thing that keeps my sanity, to be honest, because it's a really bizarre life. Because this year was one of the most difficult years professional wise, just to keep everything straight in mind. And I literally thought, I was going to split into another personality, because people don't realize that most of my job is memorization. And quite literally, if you take your job seriously, you want to get into the characters and this whole, I don't believe in this method acting thing that you probably heard of.
Yeah.
But the big thing is you spend most of your days trying to think about a character and who this person was, and go back historically, see who the king was, and you get into the madness and the craziness of these characters, and you're spending hours in a day in this fantasy world, in the mind of some, either mad king or angry person, and you're spending hours of your day
playing that role.
Yeah, playing that role. And then you start going, oh, who am I? Oh, God. And on top of it is you're thinking and you're translating. And now, thankfully I can speak French, German, and Italian, and speak a little Serbian. But the main things of operas are French, Italian, and German. And I can speak and think in those languages. But it's a weird thing, like all day to have to be thinking in a different language, or thinking two different people inside of your brain. Like, you know, and it's, you feel like you're going to crack sometimes, but
sure.
the big thing is memorization part of it. Cause I've always been known to sing, the craziest roles, quite literally. Cause I'm a little bit, you know, crazy compared to all other opera singers. Most people are very, very calm. They live very boring lives. You know, they're just playing like Candy Crush and shit like that, you know,
right.
and, you know, and that's what they do on the road, you know, but like I go crazy if I do that. So I just go out and I try to have conversations, go to bars and meet cool people from around the world, you know?
Hell yeah, man.
And it's an awesome thing, but it's weird. Cause like this year I was in 9 separate countries and, you know, on any given day, I'm speaking 2-3 languages and mixing and matching and making an email in French or talking to a friend on the phone in Italian and then switching back to Ozarkian. It's just, the brain's just kind of like, who the hell am I?
Right. Yeah, dude, I can't even imagine, man. That's
why it's nice being back home, just kind of resting and being able to talk and have good conversation where people aren't really, I mean, we have people that try and impress each other, but you know, like it's not like this. Oh, this is what I do. And you know, that's kind of the world that I have to live in a little bit. Yeah. But I've wheedled my way into being like one of the people that in the opera world, they say, oh, wow, he's this person that can sing things that other people can't. And his language skills are above other people's. And I'm like, I'm just imitating. And they go, oh, but you're a normal person. It's like,
just a redneck from the Ozarks.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. It's funny. It's funny being in that position and seeing the wonderful world of opera, or, I mean, movie stars and stuff, and working with people like one of my dear friends is Terry Gilliam, who was the guy that the director, the guy who started Monty Python and did 12 Monkeys and did all these things. He's one of my good friends because I was the lead in 2 of his operas.
Oh, nice.
And you know, when we did the opera, all these famous actors from movies and stuff were there and meeting me, and I was like, this is so bizarre. All these famous people that I've met, you know, I mean, and like singing I sang in Putin's private palace when I was in Moscow about 10 years ago. It was one of the weirdest things being there because I sang for this concert, and my dressing room was quite literally at the time the G8 conference room. Oh wow! And they said, just go in that room, and I opened the door and I was like, wait a minute. Are you sure? And like, yeah, just change your clothes in here. And I was like, all right. Wow. Yeah. And it was such a weird thing though, because the security was obviously insanely tight. Sure. And I had to go through 3 different kind of metal detectors. And as I got out, they told me to just wait out on the balcony. I kind of looked out and I was like, this is really familiar. And then I talked to my mother-in-law who loves to watch Discovery, and we had watched a special not too long before that. That was one of the private palaces that has a nuclear missile underneath, you know, in case the cases fall out. And I was like, man, I hope I do a good job tonight. You know? Right? Yeah, don't want to get blown up. Yeah, but I mean, like being in where I'm from and getting to this weird place that I thought was kind of like in movies, but it really exists, and meeting these crazy people. I just think, golly, the world's a bizarre and incredible place. And, you know, you just gotta just go with it. Well, that's a big thing.
I mean, I commend you for doing what you did, man. I mean, just taking that leap of faith and hoping that would work.
I mean, it wasn't without years and years of failure and, you know, and problems arising, thinking that like, this isn't going to work. And like about 9 years into auditioning and still never getting anywhere, basically, and going further and further into debt. I was like, I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to make it. And then I got a one good job, and then someone said, hey, he can do this. Maybe you can do that. And then it just started snowballing. And then within 5 years, I was like, I can actually do this.
I can make a living at this.
Yeah. And that wasn't until I was 33. Yeah. You know, I mean, and that was a good 10 years into putting everything that I had into it, like quite literally just putting all the money, everything. I mean, my waking hours were thinking about opera and thinking about other languages and trying to figure out how to make this a career it kind of is a pipe dream. And even now, if I were going into it now, it would be really difficult because it was different before, when I started out, because it was still, flights weren't as cheap as they are now. I mean, they're still expensive, but it was like twice as much, you know? And so you had to really focus, and it is still kind of like that for the most part. If you're going to be an opera singer, most of the people that are opera singers come from very, very rich families. Yeah. Because most, like, to give you an idea, like when I did this young artist program in St. Louis about 20 years ago, and out of the 40 to 50 singers there were two people that were like me from normal backgrounds, and I think they had a quota for having a Missouri singer, so I got in there.
Right.
So but most of these kids, not saying anything against the rich whatsoever, but they're about the only ones that can afford to get into this society of singing all the time and having lessons and learning language lessons and all that kind of stuff. But I had an amazing advantage to everybody because I'd been performing since I was a kid. So I could just, even though I didn't know how to speak these other languages, I would just imitate. And I know how to perform because I've been doing it since I was, a baby. Right. So I had a bigger advantage than most people ever have because my parents made me perform 2-3 times a week since I was a kid. So you can say I was born to be an opera singer. It sounds weird, but yeah, I mean, more so than my other friends that have, because a lot of people, even when they're in their 20s and 30s, they've never really been on stage. They've practiced in practice rooms, but they've never been on stage in front of people. And that's where weird stuff happens.
Yeah, I couldn't do it, man.
It's a weird thing.
I get nervous sitting down here talking to people, so I know,
but it is a good thing to get up in front of people and then just realize that it's. I mean, and anyone that's one of my.
All right, guys, that is going to conclude part 1 of episode 3. Make sure to tune back in here in a few days for part 2 of episode 3, another 40-minute conversation with my good buddy, Michael Spyres, some of his awesome stories from around the world. We will see you guys back here in a few days.
Thank you for listening to the OG Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Outlaw Barbers. Tune in next week for more great conversations with new guests and fresh topics.